It's the 30th of January 2022. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the kooky world of nuclear. I'm your host, Dana Durnford. I'm also known as the nuclear proctologist.org. If you fancy it and you're in the United States or Canada, you can call in at 709-589-4406, or you can text if you want me to read a text. Let's get on with it. The nuclear industry is such a strange, it's not an industry, it's a cult, a death cult or something. International Atomic Energy Agency, 100% death cult. The military, death cult. The A-10 Warthog, that's your atoms for humanity. It only shoots dirty bombs. Try wrapping your mind around that. Peaches are in sale in a country that doesn't know any better, from Japan. And that's a new nuclear power plant the United Kingdom is building. It's right in the middle of farmland. Right in the middle of farmland. We got a poll tonight. Should farming within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant or nuclear dumps be banned worldwide within 50 miles? You should just ban nuclear, obviously, right? So why do they build nuclear power plants in farmland, Dana? Now, I mean, this is the future Sizewell C in the United Kingdom in farmland. The radiation is always coming out of the nuclear power plants, and food is harvested and then shipped elsewhere. That keeps the background radiation around nuclear power plants down, and it kills you, is their hope. And so Stop Sizewell should ask the question, why are you building a nuclear power plant in farmland? And why do they all built surrounded by hundreds of square miles of farmland? Truly one of the most terrifying things about the nuclear industry is they love doing that. So get your votes in. Should farming within 50 miles of a nuclear power plant or nuclear dumps be banned worldwide? Because if you can rile up the farmers, and rightly so, because the farmers are going to realize they've murdered several million people each in increments over their lifetime, or worse. It's a truly terrifying facet of the story. Just 4 quick headlines. UN envoy halt children's return to Fukushima. UN finds no adverse health effects from Fukushima. Japan should not push residents back to Fukushima, says UN expert. UN experts say radiation from Fukushima will have no negative health effects. It's called a schizophrenic world of nuclear. Yes, the crazy of the crazies are already on the go. Iran nuclear plants could be wiped out. They're suggesting Israel would bomb an active nuclear power plant. It's bombed 2 power plants before, but not active, but did have fuel there, but not actual running plants with fuel pools there also. And Iran is not very far from Israel, so they're just going to contaminate their own country. Dana, they're smart enough to wait for the wind to blow the other way. Yeah, but the wind doesn't always blow the other way forever. But using unmanned vehicles laden with explosives, this is why the IAEA Where's the IAEA in this narrative? They don't want to have that conversation, do they? Because then the world will ask the questions. Bye-bye, IAEA. Using unmanned vehicles laden with explosives could lead to a critical Fukushima-style reactor meltdown. However, a nuclear consultant added a synchronized attack on the cooling water facilities and the external electricity supply or the electricity distribution system could lead to the overheating of a reactor core. Well, no, it will. They all run on an external power supplies like coal, oil, and gas. They have their own dedicated plants. Welcome to nuclear. And overheating of the reactor core and the spent fuel pools. Well, ponds. They're not ponds, they're pools. And they have decades of reactor cores that are hemorrhaging into your farms all day long, every day. And they're still splitting the atoms, see? I know, it's kind of like most people don't see it the way I do. To me, this is how it is, right? But the fuel pools got decades of reactor cores, and each reactor core was powering 1 million homes by splitting the atoms. And so if you put 2 million atoms on the head of a needle, you can't see it. How many atoms do you got to split to boil the water for 1 million homes? So when you put it in a pond, at the top of these buildings or wherever, it's still boiling, and it's because it's splitting the atoms, which kills all the species on the planet. Every day, there's another 1 million. So imagine if a nuclear power plant worked this way, where you only needed one set of fuel rods. And each day, you took the atoms that it produced, because they're going to pulse energy every second for millions of years, and you gave them to another power plant. And the same original plant can power 1 billion nuclear power plants that way. Because that's what you're talking about, right? It's still splitting the atom. It's just trying to get the world to appreciate how much trouble we're in because of the fuel rods that are what you call waste, most people worldwide, are still splitting the atoms you needed for 1 million homes. Where does those atoms go? They're pulsing energy every second now for millions of years. Each day another 1 million homes worth of energy is released from the fuel pools. So when you start putting decades of reactor cores into fuel pools, what's coming out of the fuel pools now each day? It's the same amount of atoms you needed for, say, 6 million homes. And the atoms are floating around looking for victims, insects, birds, animals, mammals, humans, whatever species they can find to infect, infest, and ultimately destroy. Iran has been the recipient of incapacitating explosions, cyber strikes, UMV attacks. A nuclear disaster in Japan did something strange to trees. Something is up with those trees. And they show a green picture of an exclusion zone. They didn't grow any larger or suddenly become sentient. This is a pun on comic books, by the way. But the trees outside the Daiichi nuclear meltdowns are definitely acting weird, according to a new study published that I didn't read yet, but I will. Scientists noticed the nodes where the leaves, branches, and other plant parts grow from a central point, found that the fur around the Fukushima fir trees around the nuclear exhibited weird growth patterns around them. The more radiation, in other words, the weirder the trees got. That's their interpretation of nuclear, and they're obviously not aware of how this actually works. It's the equivalent of malformations and abortions, except for trees. 10 years have passed, and still the large-scale effects are visible, the researchers concluded. Doomsday-like radiation, if fired at Unit 4, it would be a global catastrophe. A global catastrophe because of radioactive fallout. I put that there because this story showed up. European experts evaluate about decommissioning of the Fukushima nuclear power plant because the EU is tied up in a taxonomy at the moment, right? Now what you're looking at right there is a cover they put on the building, which is reactor 4 there, and the same reactor 4 would be a doomsday release if the fuel in the pool that was at the top of the buildings. They're both the official pictures. They're both the official pictures. Just bear with me. They're both the official pictures. I'm just looking for a picture to show you where the fuel pool is too. Not always straight up for anybody. Fuel pools are at the very top of the 190-foot building. You see people in paper suits to your right, pretending they're coming from a nuclear meltdown, nonchalant. It's green screen or they would have died that day. They had no tools, no chairs, in a paper suit at a nuclear meltdown. They burned allegedly 7,000 of these paper suits each day. 7,000. At the top of the depiction over there is a 190-foot building. The fuel pool's at the very top of the building. They're at ground level. You can see how much damage a detonation done to the 190-foot building. 10, 12 feet off the ground is where that hole starts. These buildings there's nothing functional left of the buildings. And these are both the official pictures. So when you see the guts of it hanging out on the other side, because there's 4 sides to a building, right? So they took this, they cleaned up around it with remote control equipment and killed a bunch of homeless people because the industry is full of cowards. They put that cap on top of what was left. This building don't physically touch it. It's not a building. It's a structure meant to deceive you. You see how big each panel is? Remember, that's a 150-foot wide building over there. They put it over this structure. There is nothing left. The building doesn't physically touch it, as you can see when I get out of the way. Getting out of the way. Saw! It can't handle any weight, obviously, right? So the deception was they built this structure off-site, brought it here with cranes, and then used these panels to cover up the exterior. Then they claimed that they were inside the building.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to be reactor building number 4. The whole of this building was blown apart by a huge explosion.
We are here inside Reactor 4 at the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant that was severely crippled during the earthquake and tsunami of 2011.
Of the decommissioning work taking place here in Reactor 4.
At the end of our tour, we were checked for radiation exposure. In 4 hours, I received the equivalent of less than a chest x-ray.
1,500 highly radioactive fuel rods inside this pool. They've got to move them outside of this reactor.
So they're all claiming they're on top of a building that don't exist.
Where I'm standing is on top of what used to...
That don't exist. That's BBC, Rupert Winfield Hayes. Pretty neat trick that it looks like this way above the building that don't exist no more. So that structure was meant to hoodwink the entire planet. But why would you hoodwink an entire planet for? What's wrong with you people? So why would all these major medias pretend they're on a building that don't exist? Why did all the other medias and universities worldwide go along with that? It's the most important question you'll ever ask in history, because it's an extinction level event. And this is not a game. On the other side of the building, they didn't even clean it up. Now, these pictures are from an unusual, you won't find these pictures anywhere else. This was a high quality picture in a local media. It was super high quality. When I zoomed in, I couldn't believe my eyes. This is the first time I ever seen the back of the building. But that's towards the ocean, that side there. Hard cases, right? They had 1,000 tanks in 2013, 1,200 tanks 2014, 900 tanks in 2017, 1,000 tanks 2019, 2020, and 2021, and 2022. So 1,000 tanks in 2013 and 1,000 tanks in 2021, 22. And so his job, Deputy Director General of France's IRSN, a prestigious institute, is not here to have a conversation. He's here to brainwash you, manipulate you, deceive you, and misrepresent what's really going on. This is the official picture of Reactor 3. This reactor they put a structure on Reactor 3. Reactor 3 to your right. Reactor 4 to your left. So they put this 177-foot structure, the same as with Reactor 4, to fake it, pretending it looks like that. Originally it looked like that. They gutted it with cranes till they got it down to whatever that is, from a 190-foot building to that. The fuel pools were at the top of them, right? And when you zoom in on it, it's obviously, it's a lunatic industry. It's a disgusting lunatic industry with disgusting people. It's Reactor 1, what's left of it. It's 100% nuclear meltdown, reactor core, and the fuel pools detonated, burnt continuously for several days. Reactor 4 by you, 3 in the center. And they're showing you pictures in order to trick and deceive you. European expert, European scumbag. The Authority of Nuclear and Radiation Risk in France, for the Radiological Protection Nuclear Safety in France, says they're getting ready to release the treated water from those tanks. If you go on my playlist, you'll find videos dedicated to the tanks and leaks and water and a full explanation with documentation. No timeline on ending the food ban. Officials in now this is the Taipei Times. We've actually done a video last week or the week before that they should be charged with sedition. This media, this junk, public. This is a lobbyist bought the media, I would imagine, off the original owners, and is using it to attack Taiwan and try to trick them into importing food from a nuclear wasteland. Lowe made the remarks amid rumors the government would announce an end to the ban, and these are the people behind the rumor, the Taipei Times. Lowe said when it comes to food imports, public health is the government's top priority, not his, but the government's, regardless of the source. But added, Taiwan's policy should be in line with international standards, which is controlled by the nuclear industry. There is no standards. There is nobody. The people in charge of these decisions, like Geraldine Thomas from the United Kingdom, or UN's agencies, or ERPA, or the IPCC, or UNSCLEAR, for 11 years, which is all United Nations, the 193 militaries is what United Nations is. Taiwan has banned food imports from Fukushima Prefecture for 11 years, as well as nearby prefectures. And one of them is Chiba, nearby prefectures in Chiba, which is 20 kilometers from Tokyo. So if 125, 55 countries banned it from 14 prefectures. That's a model of those 14 prefectures. But in reality, everybody should ban Japan food. They're growing it right by 1-ton bags of nuclear waste and putting it in the media and claiming it's okay. This is demonic. Just because the world doesn't appreciate how much danger they're in, at some point the world is going to go, is going to realize what Japan and the nuclear industry is doing. Japan is going to take the brunt of it originally, and rightfully so. No honor. Japan has no honor whatsoever. Zero honor whatsoever. And where are we to? Here we go. Taiwan imported. This is the Taipei Times, so don't put it in stone. Taiwan imported US $45 billion of goods from Japan in 2020, whilst export orders from Japan totaled $23 billion, which doesn't tell you whether it's motors or motorcycles or cars or worse, food and drink. Clear nuclear. Japanese government urges support for United Kingdom's proposed lift, and the United Kingdom is the government there will do whatever they're told, right? And just like all the prime ministers have been told to retire by Queen Elizabeth, right? U.S. FDA lifts the Japanese import restrictions September 21st of last year. No Canadian media reported on it. Canada, of course, lifted it after 93 days on June 14th, 2011. Canada, it's unbelievable. Canada lifted all restrictions within 3 months while the reactor was still full-blown meltdown. They hadn't picked up a single bag in the country, for instance. It's absurd. It's just a genocide across Canada. They call it coronavirus, but it's the Fukushima poison. They needed a cover story, and coronavirus is the one they choose for the whole planet because the radiation covered the whole planet. This model is just 20 days. If you let the model run for another 10 days, guess what? The rest of the planet is covered in radioactive fallout, right? We just seen beer made with Fukushima rice launched in Hong Kong because Hong Kong allowed rice to be imported, so they made sake. You couldn't import sake. These are lunatics, eh? These people are murdering you in your supermarkets with this stuff, and your children and your friends, and you're going to sit in silence? Really? 2 years ago, Fukushima sake shop opens in New York. You're like, okay. Well, at least it's not the Fukushima prefecture government opening a Fukushima sake shop in New York, Dana. The Fukushima government has opened a sake shop in New York. Let me read that again. Did that go past you too quick? The Fukushima government has opened a sake shop in New York. Hello, Mayor of New York. Yeah, why you talking all y'all? We want to open sake shop in New York for Fukushima. Just try making that up on your own. Exotic Japanese fruit. This is a story from yesterday. Ah, yes, the exotic Japanese fruits now available at Don Don Donki for a limited time only. And Don Don Donki, where the hell were they again? My goodness, I can't remember. It'll come up here in a bit. A little birdie once told me Fukushima Prefecture is one of Japan's leading producers of delicious fruit. You should have shot the birdie, man. If animals are talking to you, you need a psychiatrist, you sack of sake. You don't want to eat stuff from Japan a single time. It's not worth getting sick over. First up, we have the exotic persimmon that originated from Fukushima, usually around the December to February harvest. It doesn't look like the regular fruit we used to see at the local supermarkets. No, it's a Fukushima monster. A square. That can't be right. It's also loaded with radioactive materials from ongoing multiple nuclear meltdowns. One good thing about it, you're not going to get many insect bites from Fukushima, I suppose. So hurry on and grab your fill before they run out. That's the opposite of what you're supposed to do, by the way. I can't remember where Don Don Donki is to. I looked it up and I didn't get a screen capture for some reason. Where the hell was that again? Somebody will figure it out. Links are below. Don't eat stuff from Japan, folks. Don't buy it. And boycott any shops that sell it if you can. Nanaimo Art Gallery is hosting a traveling exhibition, Bombhead, inspired by the atomic age. Bombhead. So, like, abstract art? Abstract. A friend of mine is an artist, and he wanted to do... My nephew had a picture of a brace of rabbits hung on the back door of his little house, and his backpack was there and stuff like this. And he took a picture of it, and this artist wanted to paint it. And alongside of everything was clearly the whole piece of 2x4 was like 3 feet long. Went from the porch up, and the rabbit was in kind of cuts off a little bit of the 2x4 with his fur, right? So the first thing he done was the 2x4. It took him about 20 hours. And it looked just like a 2x4 when he came in the studio. Like, man, what are you going to do? Paint a 2x4? And he said, no, that is the 2x4. I painted it already. It was so amazing. I can't remember how many hours they put in on the painting, but it's absurd. Thomas Ackerman is the same way, where just a little detail could take him the entire day. It probably does, of course, because it's all about that illusion, right? That beautiful, wonderful illusion that only certain people can master. Letter to the editor. The most toxic substance on the face of Earth. Whatever comes out of a fuel pool and floats away into the farmer fields is considered 1 billion times more toxic than industrial poison. It has nuclear Power is emerging as an answer to fill the gap as we move from carbon fuels. Sounds like more nuclear industry hokum. On the front end of the complex process of milling, mining, enriching uranium, there are tremendous amounts of fossil fuels being burnt. Yeah, it's the most carbon-intensive thing in history. Just to run the reactors, you need 2 external power plants. It is the most toxic substance on the face of the earth, and there's no safe way to dispose of it. We're seeing this problem at Pilgrim Nuclear Power Station. With the horrifying thought of a Holtec releasing radiated water into Cape Cod Bay. The article puts on the hope for developing smaller, cheaper reactors, also known as small modular reactors. And the nuclear industry just asks for more time and hundreds of billions of dollars for development and research. But they won't put that kind of energy, none of them, and this is just one company alone. If they put that kind of energy and momentum into solving storage for renewables, large-scale storage, not batteries, but stuff like pumped hydro or compressed air storage. And compressed air storage, you can do it anywhere. You can do it on the moon, for goodness sakes. Or Mars, right? So you can bring solar to Mars, dig your tunnels, and you can compress air down into the tunnels because Mars has an atmosphere, right? You can press it down into tunnels to run generators for peak energy. All this leaves me with 3 questions. Couldn't the time, money, research, or be better spent on renewables? Isn't this the same old sod a nuclear industry peddled in the 50s and 60s when they predicted that nuclear power would be too cheap to meter? How gullible does the nuclear industry think the American public is? Well, they're extremely gullible, by the way. I know most of the people that follow this show, you see them commenting, talking about trying to have a conversation with a family or friend or neighbor, and it's like getting a lobotomy for the next 4 or 5 days. You're just like, what the hell did I do to talk to those people? But there is people out there, if there was a catalyst for them to learn, they can, and they hit the right people like myself, they can pick it up right away. Within a couple of hours, they can make informed decisions. Within a few programs, they're extremely astute on this subject. Legislators approve $2.25 trillion. Is this Taiwan? Yeah, it's Taiwan, NT. For government budget, which is equal to 80 billion US. And Friday, KMT lawmakers swarmed the speaker's podium at Legislature building in Taiwan during a 5-minute break and occupied it for 4 hours, which is really amazing, really. The move was in protest against a statement by DPP legislators who had said earlier in the day the government should lift the ban on Fukushima food imports before the Lunar New Year holiday. Poison all your family when they come back, right? Oh, your family's coming back to enjoy vacation. You should poison them with Fukushima food. I'm a politician. Bring back the death squad, you ask me. The import ban was imposed for food safety reasons. About 2 weeks after the meltdowns at the Fukushima Daiichi plant. Notice how they put an earthquake and tsunami every single time. For the past 11 years, Taiwan has maintained an impossible ban because Japan is shipping it to other prefectures, relabeling it, and shipping it on to Taiwan. Taiwan has maintained an illusionary ban on food imports from 5 despicable Japanese prefectures in Fukushima, one, the Guma, Chiba, Ibaragi, Tochigi. And Chiba is just 20 kilometers from the capital, Tokyo, with 36 million people. He later posted an apology on Idiot Page, aka Metaverse, now used to be known as Facebook, saying that his statement in Legislator was his personal view. Well, you don't go to Legislator to make personal views, and everybody knows it so. The report of an impending announcement by the government after the passage of the 2022 budget bill were mere speculations. Yeah, and you don't have a curse. If that was true, you would have said it while it was happening, and you wouldn't wait and put it up on a Facebook page the next day when the blowback finally came. It's a despicable thing to do, is to poison everybody in your country for a paycheck. It's despicable. That's the norm, though. That's nuclear, Dana. Indeed. How to become a good ancestor. After the nuclear crisis, hang on, I got to go down. Because this video, if somebody wants to embed the video, the minute I go live, Google shuts off my embed feature. And I allow embedding. Let me might as well show you something else. I got to do it every time I go live. I got to go and click that. Because if people want to embed the video. Now, once my video is rendered back up on my site, I can't share it with everybody. Watch this. It's completely restricted. Publish to subscribers, feed and notify subscribers. That is permanently locked out. I don't have access to it. As soon as I started up the site, that was permanently locked out. Because the nuclear industry has lobbyists at Google. And they'll do anything for their little paycheck. They'll murder 1 million people to get their paychecks each Friday. After a nuclear crisis, 200 Japanese pensioners volunteered to face the dangers of radiation instead of the young. The cancer would take several decades to develop, meaning they would no longer be alive to experience it. This is what I mean, but people are extremely gullible when they regurgitate that narrative. You're going into a dead zone where it's a lethal dose all over the place first, from gamma shines, x-rays, neutron burst. Lethal doses all over the place. You can't avoid it. So that's why we say it was only the homeless went in there. And there's 1,800 illnesses and diseases and autoimmune deficiencies and injuries you can get before cancer shows up. And you can get cancer right away when you're in that environment. It's called leukemia, where you produce more white blood cells than red blood cells because of radiation damage. Now, if you walk past at a nuclear meltdown with multiple nuclear reactors and fuel pools detonating, it's not hard to picture them walking past fuel. And your organs will start to melt, and you will die that day or that week or that month, depending how many seconds you spent in that environment. The Greeks believed that a society grows great when old men plant trees in whose shade they know they shall never sit. Which is true, right? If, the trees benefit all the humans and species and the air, oxygen, etc. In 2010, I worked with the British Prime Minister David Cameron. And so now what? Are we supposed to give you credibility or something? Way to blow your credibility. In November 2015, 2 days after terrorists killed 89 people in a Paris theater. It's in France. It's most likely a false flag staged event, right? The writer wrote a powerful open letter to them on Facebook. His wife had been among them murdered. He said, "You want me to be scared and to see my fellow citizens through suspicious eyes and to sacrifice my freedom for security, and you have failed." No, that's exactly what you've done. How dare you say you didn't? South Carolina's scientists research at Chernobyl faces trouble if the Ruskies invade Ukraine. If the Ruskies... Well, first off, Russia's not going to go nuke Ukraine. It doesn't need to. All you got to do is walk in and say, "Give me the keys, the gig's up." And no problem. There'll be no resistance. Lots of posturing right now, but no resistance if it happens. Tim Mercer, who was supposed to replace some of the major apologists, I put an end to that quite a few years ago, made a series of discoveries about wildlife. I've read most of his studies, by the way, and he's got a lot out there. Birds had developed tumors. Butterfly populations were suffering, and some animals had genetic damage. One of the most direct worries for scientists is that Russia could invade Ukraine through Chernobyl. Okay, troops, we're going to fight an invisible enemy. And then we're going to get into a war with Ukraine. Already, Ukraine troops are on guard near Chernobyl. You really think Russia's going to attack Chernobyl, do you? But even if Russia were to invade another part of Ukraine, the aftershock would still be felt at Chernobyl. Musser said, "I hate that guy in a passion." Documenting the numbers of large animals that frequent the area and how radiation from 86 disaster impacts vegetation, which is a keen interest to the United States Space Agency, NASA. If NASA's involved, then we're talking evil. Because of his knowledge about Chernobyl, he also has been sought after to discuss radiation fallout in Fukushima, right, which he downplayed over and over and over. Excuse me. They've written about 130 scientific papers on Chernobyl and Fukushima. I've called them out at least 10 times. These are scumbags. Chernobyl disaster considered the worst nuclear accident in history. Really, a 200-ton reactor is worse than 4 800-ton reactors that had decades of reactor cores at the top of the buildings lost also. At least 20 reactor cores would be a very conservative number that were all 4 times the size of Chernobyl and were pure uranium, pure plutonium versus Chernobyl's graphite. It's the difference is each Fukushima reactor, for its ability to produce emitters, is 100 times Chernobyl. Chernobyl was brutal. Don't get me wrong. I've got shows on my site, presentations on it. Bear with me. I'll try not to slurp. Yeah. The radiation release was several times higher than the amount generated by the atomic bombs. Castle Bravo nuclear test in the Bikini Atoll was equal to 1,000 14-kiloton Hiroshima-sized bombs. 1,000 Hiroshima nuclear bombs going off at the same time in the same place. And to claim that the radiation release was several times higher, it's a meltdown. So a nuclear weapon is typically 5-10 pounds, say. Those 14 kilotons. We're talking tens of millions of pounds at Fukushima. Research also discovered that many species of animals in the more highly contaminated areas have dwindled. From butterflies, bumblebees, spiders, which last year on the research expedition we discovered again that those species didn't recover from Fukushima, and because the trip ended short because they took down my site when I was out 400 kilometers away from home looking for spiders. And we're going to have to redo those videos and get them back up on this site on top of that. And a decade of research, get that up on this site at some point. We're already working on just getting last year's research back up on the site for marine species die-off. We got a couple of them now in the playlist, and for the pictures, we have 2 playlists now to cover the several thousand pictures. We got that back up on the site. Some research indicates the radiation could affect animals' abilities to reproduce. First off, this is well-known fact. You don't need Tim Mercer to know that. That's true for birds and animals and mammals and humans. That's what radiation does. And after nuclear testing, aka nuclear war, same bombs, same radioactive fallout, it changed the sex ratio of all the species and humans worldwide. More males than females being born because of that radioactive fallout worldwide, which meant a reduction in the total population of all species, not just humans. It's a scumbag industry, isn't it? And they could be indicators of how humans exposed to consistent doses of radiation over time would be affected. Like we've already covered this, Tim Mercer ain't going to teach us anything new. Radiation could affect animals' abilities to reproduce, and hopefully you can't reproduce anymore. North Korea confirms 2 tactical guided missiles tested. Whoopie-doo. What do you expect? What would you do if you were in that position? United Nations burned down every community in North Korea. Millions dead, millions missing, 10 million injured. Japan to help with Bill Gates' next generation nuclear power project, because everybody in the United States is too stupid to do it, apparently, in the nuclear industry. You got to get the genocide machine to come over and help moron Bill Gates. Bill Gates, how many, for like his operating systems, he needs around 10,000 computer engineers. American billionaire Gates, American genocidal billionaire Gates, American omnicide billionaire Gates is the founder and chair of TerraPower. There's been 1,000 before him, which plans to build his nuclear power plant in the U.S. state by 2028. Carbon-free, reliable, bullshit solution, right? Taiwan faces egg shortage and prices rising ahead of Spring Festival. But politics first. DPP members are claiming that DPP authorities mulling on lifting the ban on the Fukushima food imports potentially before the Spring Festivals, as they believe there's a public basis now to do so after the anti-racofime pork referendum became void. Any excuse to poison the entire population, I notice. Australia just exported its first batch of fuel. It doesn't emit CO2, and there's just one catch. They built their own ship to transport hydrogen, a fuel that several major economies have pinned their hopes on to help them decarbonize. And no matter what it is, it's to decarbonize. It's called, when you see that kind of symmetrically throughout the entire planet, that's United Nations at work for you. And hydrogen is unbelievably carbon intensive to produce. The project uses brown coal, the lignite, a high emitting energy source to produce the hydrogen. So they use a high emitting energy source to produce the hydrogen. In fact, almost all of the hydrogen used today is made from fossil fuels. Developing green hydrogen produced when renewable energies like wind and solar powers electrolyzer to split water into hydrogen and oxygen is a key priority for places like the US, China, the EU, Japan, South Korea. But green hydrogen isn't commercially viable yet. Right, so if you use like geothermal energy with compressed air storage or pumped hydro, I think like geothermal energy from deep in the earth and tidal energy, because you can plan ahead 300 years and know what the tide's going to do. And you couple that with compressed air storage, you're never going to have like a carbon-free anything on, right? Because that's just how it works. But that'll be the closest you can get is to renewable, and then use the compressed air storage to make the hydrogen. I think that's a winner, right? It was then trucked to a liquefaction facility in the Port of Hastings. It's cooled to minus 253 degrees. Liquefying it to less than 800 times its gases volumes. So they reduced the volumes by 800 times by cooling it to 250 degrees Celsius. It's pretty clever, right? That's definitely clever. Some of the hydrogen will need to be vented along the way so pressure in the vessel doesn't cause it to pop. You can imagine how big of a bang that would be, because if there's a spark, I ain't going to find any pieces after. Save and strengthen democracy. Possible solutions to issues. With the U.S. Senate's recent failure to protect American democracy. But the word democracy doesn't exist in the Constitutions, the Bill of Rights, the Magna Cartas. Did you know that? Because like 51% can take away the rights of 49%. We used to live in a republic, even here in Canada, where everybody had the same rights. And that's the simple, smart, long-term way to do things, right? And now corporations, right, through an amendment to the slavery laws, have butchered the attributes of human rights and stole some of those attributes for the corporations, which is called corporate personhood. And corporations have used that now to enslave a sovereign people, which is what Supreme Court Justice Hugo Blackhead wrote an eloquent dissent in the 1930s about how absurd it was. An amendment meant to free slaves from an oppressive government was used by the government, or used by corporations to oppress the sovereign people, to take away their freedoms, their liberties, and their inalienable rights as people in the countries that they... I just learned from Fox News, well, there you go with your credibility. Germany is the largest purchaser of Russia oil and natural gas, and Germany has delayed the shipment of weapons from the bullies, aka NATO, to Ukraine, and we should stop purchasing German-made automobiles, cancel visas for tourists to visit Germany this year, and put pressure on Germany to acting as it should, as a part of NATO. So obviously the stories there about somebody's jobs held up in Germany to do with NATO, and this is their way of lashing out at Germany. General Richard Toner's letter, we have the solution. Advocating nuclear power inaccurately minimizes the problem of nuclear waste. The alleged problem of nuclear waste disposal was also solved decades ago. It touts existing technology as a solution for the future waste disposal problem. Time for a few inconvenient facts. There is no solution for waste, by the way. Highly radioactive nuclear waste is now stored at great government expense at individual reactor sites across the country, according to the non-regulatory committees. We have no strategy for its disposals, and the WIPP in New Mexico collects mostly contaminated clothing, tools, and equipment in your dreams, even if growing backlog of waste and will close within the next decade. Oh, sure. For examples, in Washington State, the Hanford Nuclear Reservation, where weapons-grade plutonium was produced for many years, harbors 56 million gallons of radioactive waste. 56 drums they're talking about, with 1 million gallons each. There's 41 miles of unlined trenches at Hanford. 41 miles. And at the dump in Hanford, it's illegal to have unlined trenches. But at Hanford Nuclear 585 square mile site, they have 41 miles of trenches in the 50s, 60s, and 70s where they just dumped the nuclear sludge directly into the ground. They have, I don't know the exact number, it was tens of billions of gallons of nuclear liquid they dumped directly into pits with no linings. And the Columbia River is the most polluted river in North America. There's nothing alleged about our existing nuclear waste problem, and we are nowhere near solving it. It's all still splitting the atoms, hemorrhaging radiation 24/7 into the environment. It's a perpetual machine it's a perpetual disease factory for all 8 million species. Nuclear energy warrants further investigation, but it's hardly pollution-free. It does, yeah, investigation, like criminal investigations. And so Angela Merkel, this is the Globe and Mail, who promotes uranium stocks 3 times a week. So when Angela Merkel decided to take nuclear power plants offline, that cut into the stocks, right? And she actually originally had reversed the decision to close the plants. Fukushima happened, then she reversed her decision to continue closing nuclear power plants. At the same time, she abandoned Germany's nuclear program. Germany has made itself a slave to the Russian gas as the nuclear energy disappeared from the mix. So what? America's a slave to Iran for most of its existence in the petro era. They decided Germany should phase out the nuclear energy, even as though some of the country's nuclear plants were fairly modern. And his dependence on the anti-nuclear Greens were part of his coalition government was no doubt beyond the decision to kill off the nuclear industry. Well, you don't just kill off an energy industry because you're bored. You don't kill it off. You kill it off because it's killing off you. Miss Merkel was initially critical of her predecessor's energy policies. She called his decision to kill off the nuclear plants the destruction of the national property, and his coddling of Putin. She actually reversed his decision and extended the operating lives of the nuclear power plants by years. Then came 2011 Fukushima catastrophe in Japan, and she quickly reversed her reversal. And at the end of last year, they closed 3 more plants a month ago, and they got 3 left. They'll be closed at the end of 2022. And he claimed without spewing greenhouse gases. The whole problem is we don't got any media, like mainstream media, anywhere, or their lapdogs, or attack dogs, whatever you want to call it, capable of having the conversation, let alone having the conversation. If the new German government were smart, it would try to fix Merkel's dubious energy legacy by giving new life to the country's nuclear plants. This is the Global Mail. Now, I know what you're saying, Dana. Right, they attacked you years ago. You're just angry at them. No, I got them back many times over. The scumbags. They promoted uranium stocks 3 times a week, non-stop. When Fukushima was melting down, they were like, buy, the price is perfect. They're vicious, disgusting parasites. Let her avoid the myth-making about multi-Merkel. So that's the Financial Times. So you start to see all the big major media coming out and saying, don't give her a legacy, she's a scumbag. Los Alamos National Laboratory workers contaminated in a radiation leak. That's not the first time or the last time. And Los Alamos National Laboratory is built on one of the biggest freshwater aquifers in the United States. And it's decimated now forever. The breach in the seal compartment, which had this is what they call glove boxes. So these are not glove boxes, that's their way of playing it down. But generally these are gloves that are in a nuclear fabrication environment. So you were able to reach through from the outside with special gloves and 3-foot lead. You got 3-foot lead glass, and then you got thin gloves. That's why, it's just nonsense. The workers are disposable in the industry. The breach in a sealed compartment, which had gloves attached so workers can handle radioactive material, prompted a 6-person team to evacuate after ear monitors sounded alarm earlier this month. We're only hearing about it now. 2 of the 6 workers had contamination on their skin and paper suits, with one showing a high enough exposure to warrant treatment in the lab's occupational medicine clinic. Occupational medicine clinic. I don't like the sound of that at all. A lab spokesman wrote in an email because picking up a phone is too hard. Preliminary results from evaluations of affected employees indicated the exposures are within safety limits. You don't have these glove boxes because it's harmless radiation. Based on initial indicators, long-term health effects are not anticipated. But that's typically how radiation manifests, is long-term. Because your white blood cells attack it every day for the rest of your life. The radiation that sequesters in your muscles, your organs, and your bones. You're displacing the red blood cells. It carries oxygen and nutrition permanently. That compromises your immune system. Eventually builds a tumor around it. Or it gets you another way. Which is like 1,800 different diseases. An incident report said the employee was given chelation therapy, which was an internal, like eating blue Parisienne. It's like a chalk, eating like chalks to hopefully aggregate the radiation and excrete it out of your body. A treatment used to remove heavy metals from the body. So they have no way to quantify that there's not going to be no adverse health effects. This is madness to even suggest it, by the way. All 6 employees received nasal swabs. And of course, they used that, right, to say, no, well, there was nothing on your nasal swab, so you're okay. No insurance for you when you get sick and die later. 3 of them showed signs of possible breathing in radiation, with the one who went to the clinic having the highest readings. And labs and the National Nuclear Security Administration, there is no such thing as a Nuclear Security Administration. You got dumps right across the country. The ocean is full of the dumps. You dumped it in landfills. All the rivers, all the aquifers are contaminated across the country. You radiated all the oases in the oceans. There was no security. National Nuclear Security. High school students with gun permits, basically. The report stated a worker noticed something amiss on the right side of the glove box. Notified the radiological control technicians, who sounded the evacuation alarm and red-lit the room to bar access. The lab has other glove box mishaps in recent years. In March, last year, a worker ripped a protective glove, contaminating 2 workers' protective equipments. Tests showed neither breathed in radiation. You can't quantify that statement. In 2020 June, 15 employees had to be tested after a worker tore a glove and released radiation into the room. The worker who ripped the gloves was the only one who tested positive. 4 years ago, workers put a plutonium pit in an authorized glove box and placed fission material in a plutonium metal shell, causing a brief evacuation. And similar incidences happened 6 months before that. That's absurd. What Bikini told looks like 60 years post-nuclear testing. You can't see it or smell it or taste it or hear it or touch it or feel it or pick it up or throw rocks at it. Looking is no different. You can't see it. It's contaminated over 1 million square kilometers. After World War II, all of the Toll's population was forcibly relocated in 1946 to make way for idiot nuclear test, which is a nuclear war. Nuclear test is a nuclear war. It's the same bomb, same radioactive fallout. For the nuclear industry, between 1946 and 1958, Bikini Atoll was irradiated to hell. Like Castle Bravo was done out there, was equal to 1,000 nuclear tests at the one time. It was subject to 23 nuclear tests by the United States. So see, people think of 23 nuclear bombs like you think of Hiroshima, say? But just one of those, the Bravo, was equal to 1,000 Hiroshima bombs going off at the same time. So saying 23 nuclear tests doesn't really describe what the horror, what happened there, and to the rest of the planet, because the radioactive fallout was worldwide. Another stunning lagoon to see a ship graveyard. And that the underwater test, which is what you're looking at right there, the salt water, the sulfur from the salt water has a bizarre effect. What's known as a sulfur peroxide hydrogen buckyball, a spherical, like a soccer ball, basketball type shape, and it's able to ingest curium and uranium and plutonium, and it makes them very mobile, very hot particles, very energetic. And the thing about radiation fallout is kind of deceptive, the word fallout, because radiation as its own, it pulses energy at 186,000 miles per 100 trillionth of a second pulse. And it does this, it's like a little engine, right? So it can propel the radiation in many senses, keeps it from settling because it's pulsing energy every second, It falls back down to the earth and pulses energy every second, right? At the speed of light. Is that the usage of the word bikini for the women's low-waisted two-piece bathing suits come from this site. It was coined in 1948 by scumbag French who named their new bathing fashion garments for the explosive effects created by the sexy attire. Population forcibly removed for the scumbag nuclear industry. The American authorities had promised Bikini Atoll residents they would be able to return home after they were done nuking their homes. And families were resettled in the 70s, but dangerously high levels of contamination were found in the well water, and they were evacuated after being poisoned again. And in the end, the United States paid the victims a measly $125 million in compensation. And so water is a good moderator or a good shield. So they can do stuff like this, but you can still get lethal doses doing it. What's happening? That's a nice play on words, eh? What? W-A-T-T. What's happening? Harnessing that great nuclear reactor in the sky. This is a great story. Pollution-free sunlight is the fuel. Pollution-free sunlight. Enough solar energy strikes the earth every hour to power our whole worldwide civilization for a year. So in 24 hours, there's enough power hitting the earth to power the entire planet for the next 24 years. It's pretty amazing. There are many small, important things you can do to fight climate change, which is Fukushima radioactive fallout. Fukushima radioactive fallout is climate change / global warming / carbon. Because oil, gas, and coal emissions don't cover the planet in plumes like that. Only nuclear does that. And this model, of course, is only 20 days. If you look at the model run for another 10, 20 days, covers the rest of the planet, right? Nuclear is climate change. Carbon footprint. And the carbon footprint was Miles Allen. United Nations stole that narrative. Oh no, carbon footprint was BP Oil, was a massive advertising campaign. That's where carbon footprint came from. To blame you for the oil wrecks because you wanted, this was your fault. It's like blaming the taxis coming to pick you up and they have an accident and they blame you for it. Why is solar green? It's green because pollution-free sunlight is the fuel delivered to you every day by the great nuclear fusion reactor in the sky, the sun. It's green because your solar electricity is generated right where it's used, eliminating the 20% transmission losses from centralized power stations. It's green because solar power runs for decades with no maintenance, because there are no moving parts to wear out, and no pollution and no noise. And some of my home solar panels are 30 plus years old and still doing just fine. And let's remember, if there should ever be a massive uncontrolled solar energy spill, it'll just be another sunny day. Global solar is doubling every 3 years with no end in sight. And solar will be the largest single source of energy on the planet in 15 to 20 years. Actually, in about 6 years. Solar technology is new to Western Canada. In BC, for instance, there are only about 3,000 rooftop solar arrays powering homes and businesses. In Japan, there are over 2 million. Australia has more than 3 million. And China, I've lost count, it's by far the world's leader in solar, with some 10,000 new solar homes every single day. That's incredible, eh? And the U.S. is poised to catch up with China in just 6 years. That's amazing. And did you know the cost of solar power has dropped by 80% since 2010? 80% since about 2010. Well, that's pretty amazing. Solar panels are rugged. They are so good and reliable, they come with a 25-year warranty. And it's achieving grid parity, meaning it can compete with all other sources of energy without subsidies. And you get up to now the 50-year life out of it. And attaching the solar array to the electric grid, a grid-tired system, has nearly solved the problem of how you run your house. So with grid-tired, your solar array first powers your home and then feeds the extra power you don't need right now into the grid, which builds up a credit on your account. That credit can then be used at night and winter, and it works perfectly and can result in reduced or zero electric bills year after year. Nuclear development is coming soon to the Los Alamos National Laboratories. Remember, Savannah River was trying to build a mixed oxide facility. They spent about $30 billion on it. Well, they stole most of that. And it flopped, right? So Savannah Riverside National and Los Alamos National Laboratory are going to be making the pits, the plutonium pits for nuclear weapons for the Energy Department, which is the promoter of nuclear. I'll try that again here. The nuclear. And so that's the energy in a nuclear bomb, basically. Propaganda. The plutonium pits in the U.S. used to be generated only at Rocky Flats. Of course, the FBI had to raid Rocky Flats. At one point, the stockpile was 31,000 weapons in the United States. I know at one point they had around 50,000 nuclear weapons. Hang on. At one point they had 50,000 nuclear weapons in the United States. Department of Energy called on Los Alamos to increase efforts at the lab to produce 30 nuclear pits, which is the actual triggers to set off plutonium. They're plutonium triggers, right? And so all together between the Savannah River, is it the Savannah River? Ooh. In other words, they're lunatics. That's the mixed oxide fuel facility they were trying to do at the Savannah River site. Let me keep her going here. And now that place is incredibly radioactive. We got a poll going tonight. Let me remind anybody. We got 48 votes, 100%. Should farming within 50 miles of nuclear power plants or nuclear dumps be banned worldwide? And so that's 48 votes. The nuclear trolls, are they? I hope you guys are not sick tonight. You're usually here just torturing me by now. Hopefully they're lost in a snowstorm. suit argues the increased pit production was not only intended for replacing existing warheads, but to develop new warheads. This project was developed, and it says, this project was developed with proper environmental analysts. It's supposed to say without. This project was developed without proper environmental analysts, the suit read, or proper planning for where associated nuclear waste was disposed of. So they got rid of the word out. Instead of saying the project should be developed without, or was developed without, they got rid of the word out. And it makes a big difference, see? All of a sudden now it's like really confusing. The project was developed with proper environmental analysts, the suit read, or, because the word or is so important here, proper planning, because it suggests that out is missing in that narrative. So they probably got hacked, because it's the nuclear industry, see? And they're disgusting parasites, as everybody knows. Pakistan terms India's claims on nuclear proliferation dubious. Pakistan's record on nuclear is despicable. So is India. Pakistan had termed India's statement about its disbandment record as dubious, accusing New Delhi for being responsible for pioneering nuclear proliferation in South Asia, as if they're not doing it. It is India which dealt a death blow to the non-proliferation norms by conducting its first nuclear test in 1974, followed by additional tests in 1998. Yeah, and the 1998 test, there was 9 of them. And for every one India done, Pakistan done one too. And so the whole world started waking up after about 6 tests each. And they kept going. And France was like, well, everybody's looking at India. We're going to go set one off, and they got caught. Remember that? I remember that when it happened. India has always opposed formalization of a moratorium on nuclear tests in South Asia. So, Americans have, Russia has. It's not like they're the only actors on the planet. They're all scumbags. If they're nuclear, they're scumbags. I mean, you can't be in, no offense to the scumbags, but they can't be in the nuclear industry unless you're a useful idiot scumbag. No, I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm just saying that's how it is, right? India continues to exponentially expand production by building new fast breeder reactors, which makes its own fuel of plutonium, and has also amassing tons of fissile material stocks in the so-called strategic reserves of fission product. This is what I mean. It's a lunatic industry, and if you hire the crazies, then they're gonna and let them loose. It's a genocide machine. Valérie Pécresse calls, which is France, presidential candidate, by the way, calls for a massive remobilization of the nuclear industry, because the nuclear industry is one of the biggest industries in France, by far, right? And it's generations of inbreeding in increments now over 50 years of the people in the nuclear industry usually are the children of the government employees. And all this interbreeding, right now the generations that entitle a lot, they'll kill the country rather than give up their jobs. And they're on a strike right now, a lot of them. Calls for a massive remobilization of the nuclear industry. So she's pandering to an influential and powerful group of scumbags in France. Well, let me remind you, Valérie, how nuclear kills fish. Here's just a couple of different ways a nuclear power plant kills fish. The aging plants have a devastating impact on the surrounding fish populations. Environmental analysts in 2 states have found that nuclear facilities kill more than 17 billion fish annually in New York and another 9 billion in New Jersey. And there is strong evidence that the decline in fish stocks along the entire northeast Atlantic seaboard is due more to the destructions of baby fish than to overfishing of adults by the commercial fleets. And that Indian Point plant on the Hudson River, which sucks in 2.5 billion gallons of water daily, kills about 2 billion juvenile mature fish a year in its screens and thermal plumes. And that the NRC estimated more than 300 billion baby fish are killed each year when they are sucked into its 40-foot wide intake pipes. And the estimated trillions of baby fish are exterminated every year in the heat exchangers. And France, of course, 70% of its fresh water goes to nuclear. They have hundreds of people die, senior citizens, every summer during heat waves because the nuclear plant needs that water. So people can't even use air conditioners, right? And end up dying in heat exhaustions. So a few inbreeds can get a big check each year from the nuclear industry. First off, Valérie, why did you wait till all your nuclear plants are old and decrepit when, it takes 10 to 20 years to build a nuclear reactor for the French for the French government employees? It takes about 15 years right now plus. They still haven't got reactors that are up and running. What would happen if a nuclear bomb landed in Leeds? So we were talking about this on the end of last week's show, right? Where there was this site you can go and put in what would happen if a certain kiloton bomb hit this city or that city. So what we seen was all kinds of news sites came out and asked and played with the statistics for their communities. What would happen if a nuclear bomb detonated in South End? You incinerate everybody within square miles. What would happen if a nuclear bomb exploded in Huddersfield? Well, the same thing. You exterminate everybody basically in increments for sure. World War III, here's what would happen if a nuclear bomb dropped in New York. And blow it up. And map shows how much of Scotland would be destroyed if a nuclear bomb hit 3 major cities. Why the frig would anybody want to bomb Scotland for? Come on. Well, because they're keeping the UK's nuclear subs there, I suppose. Swedish government approves final repository for spent nuclear fuel. Don't mind why you're laughing. I'm not trying to insult you, Sweden. I'm not. Sweden has spent 40 years looking for a repository, and in about 60 years, if they go right now, in about 60 years it'll be ready. So, over 100 years to dig a hole in the ground to stop the stuff from splitting atoms into the environment. So they don't even care. Not only that, they're doing it under the ocean. Look at this. They're doing it right under the ocean, the water. I mean, that's disgusting to build a nuclear power plant close to water. It's revolting to do that. But look how big this thing is. This is huge, and it's right underwater. So the idea of that is, at some point it's going to blow up and melt down. And when it comes up to the surface, all this water is going to run in and fill it up. Then the water comes out. The radioactive water comes out for millions of years and kills the whole planet. Like, how can you build something under the ocean when you know what is going to happen? Well, that's their oh shit plan. This is why they build the nuclear power plants right on the water. Everything runs downhill, right? Probably surrounded by farmland. Again, when they show you these pictures, how many times have we seen these pictures? When you go looking for real pictures, they're surrounded by farms. But why would you build it right underwater? They're kind of demonic. Oh, well, we know why. Because you know it's going to melt down. You want it to fill up with water. But you don't care what happens when that happens. That's a guaranteed extermination event. Because once one of them melts down, the rest of them melts down too. Because you're talking 9,000 degree Fahrenheit temperatures. The storage facility would keep the country spent and highly radioactive nuclear fuel safe for the next 100,000 years. Look, the industry, it doesn't know how to tell the truth. It refuses to do it. And then it builds its like repositories on that ideology where it's simply not true. What Canada's out there claiming right now is that if you put a tenth of an inch of copper on the cast can't rust for over 1 million years. Go throw copper, put a copper in a glass of water with some salt and check it in a couple of days. Or put it in the bottom of your boat, see what happens. It'll just eat a hole right through it, see? Sweden's largest environmental protection project is as large as sweeping under the carpet to kill every generation forever project. This is ludicrous to call it an environmental protection project. It's demonic. Come on, planet, you speak out against this stuff. It's not very hard to say no. And all this stuff, by the way, won't go down there for least. It won't go down into its underwater grave. You won't put it in its underwater grave for at least 60 years. And so it's still splitting the atom for the next 60 years to make sure there'll be no life left on the planet. And then what? Then it don't matter. You don't have to put it under the ground at that stage. 60 years. It took them 40 years to find a spot. And the spot is right by a nuclear power plant, by the way. 40 years to find a spot. And you're going to put it right under your water, where you know that's what's going to run in there. You kind of lose faith in humanity the minute you hang around the nuclear narratives. The final repository method was reviewed and assessed by the Non-Radiation Safety Authority. When fully developed sometime by 2080s, give or take 100 years, it will be 60 kilometers of tunnel with 6,000 canisters, and they weigh 50,000 tons each. The repository will comprise around 60 kilometers of tunnel. So you can imagine how much radiation is emitting to the environment every second just from Sweden's. It's madness. It'll be developed sometime by 2080s. 50 years after they're dead and buried. Below ground, the repository covers 3 to 4 square kilometers and is placed at a depth of 500 meters below a water. It just defies any rationale. The final repository provides long-term solutions for electricity generation. It is therefore our contribution to enabling fossil-free living within one generation. You got 40 years in collaboration. Research institutes, universities, higher educational institutions in Sweden and worldwide. And there's going to be another 60 plus years, 65, 70, 80 years before you can do it. Did your parents drop you fuckers on your heads or something? Here, have some Fukushima. Have some food from United Kingdom. You're going to be stupid. Sizewell C nuclear power station. Showing you the picture. Everybody's like, so what's wrong with that, Dana? That's pretty cool looking. If you eat the food from the farms, you get sick and die, and your children get sick and die, and your friends get sick and die. Does anybody, like, this is so evil. A future like all, as I showed you at the beginning, all these nuclear power plants. The government injects $100 million to Sizewell C nuclear power plant. $100 million. Do you know how much it costs to build it? It's like 23 billion euros. Like almost 30 billion US. And $100 million. They're not, they tip that much every morning at breakfast, for God's sakes. Extra measures will be put in place to make it easier for local communities to scrutinize the proposals. When I was reading that, I almost peed myself when I was laughing. I had to go to the bathroom. Includes extending the pre-examination period to allow more time for interested parties to register with the planning inspectorates. So if the inspectorates don't understand this is stupid and lunatic and genocidal, then you're going to get poisoned. And I can trust you, they don't. They're like, what's wrong with that? That's great. The radiation goes in the food, we ship it away, no background radiation for the pesky anti-nuclears to bitch about. North Korea conducted long-range missile test. If we done headlines worldwide every time America done a test, there'd be nothing else in the news cycle. Deadly Bethesda tunnel fire murder conviction upheld. This was a investor who made a lot of money, and because so much fear-mongering about nuclear Korea, going to bomb America, prosecutor described, he had a guy dig a tunnel collapsed on the guy and killed him, right? And they charged him with homicide or manslaughter. He was a computer hacker who had a paranoid fixation on a possible nuclear attack by North Korea. A paranoid fixation, just like the Winnipeg Sun here in Canada has. Look at that. PG&E proposes Nanaimo battery storage project to help replace Diablo Canyon. La 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 la. Everybody's crazy, lunatic, and la 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 la. So, why would you do anything? Why wouldn't you use like pumped hydro, where you pump water up a hill with excess energy, and when you need it, there's your peak power for 6 hours a day, and storage for years of water that comes down the hill. And you can pump compressed air and wind storage, where your excess energy, you pump compressed air down into a mine shaft at, tops is 120 psi. But PG&E wants to build a series of battery energy storage projects. It's like the ice wall, right? Why not build a real wall? And so PG&E wants to use batteries instead of compressed air storage for pumped hydro. It doesn't make any sense. Why not use compressed air instead of trying to develop batteries that everybody's trying to create for automotive, for instance? Don't look up. Physicists say killer comet and Netflix could be destroyed. First off, it's a physicist, and you're going to get more truth if you go get your fortunes read by a gypsy somewhere. West Virginia legislator could make a big mistake in nuclear energy tomorrow. And fast-track a new nuclear energy power plant this week. Rate and taxpayers would be well advised to consider the recent case of Plant Vogtle, a set of nuclear power reactors and generators in Georgia along the radioactive Savannah River. Georgians have been bombarded for over 30 years with rate hikes, litigation, cost overruns, evasive, debatable lobbying information, and never-ending series of safety and environmental questions. And the Pacific Ocean itself took the brunt of Fukushima. And as we saw in Chernobyl, an entirely possible core reactor meltdown would have fatal and geologically devastating effects. Rate and taxpayers should seriously reflect on the impact of Georgia's successful and safe $25 billion Westinghouse and General Electric reactors at the risk at Plant Vogtle. Successful and safe. Legislators should investigate online the Hanford reactor and Columbia River experience in Washington State, where officials are still storing 53 million gallons. So you keep hearing those same narratives from people who don't know much, because the nuclear industry writes the article and they put their name on it. And they put their name on it. Okay, all right. I'm going to end the poll in a few moments. Should farming within 50 miles of nuclear power plants or nuclear dumps be banned worldwide? I have a stellar 100% agreement that within 50 miles, farms should be banned. Well, what an evil, despicable industry to build their nuclear plants in farmland. That's evil. That's contempt for everybody. Nothing says evil like building nuclear power plants and dumps like Canada's doing in farmlands. Like, wow, man. That's inconceivable. Let's end that poll. Dana Nasana, good night, Dana. Colette S. Hi, Colette. Andrew B, which is CFINSTR. James Lucid. Hi, James. James Megan. I only serve one king. Hi, Lori. David Allen. Good night, everybody. Christopher. Port Angeles. Ella. Albert. Miles, the unit. Hi, Miles. Don Vincent. Sacramento, Lynn. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. Great day tomorrow. Sarge Marine, you too. Good night, everyone. Just a quick shout out. Tree Fruit. Does it really matter if I do shout outs? Probably not. I don't mind it though. Hopefully the day comes when there's so many people I can't do shout outs because there's too many people. And then they start blogging and I can take a day off. That'd be cool. Of course I can't, right? Because you got to check everybody that comes along. Sonic 333. Mad weather the last couple of days. 666 subscribers. I thought I had 696. I do got 696 subscribers. Korka, Steve. The Sonic 3.3 is 100 miles from wind scale. Oh my God. Don't eat the food from there, man. At least you're 100 miles away anyway. They're still not far enough, but it's definitely better than being in the communities that are close to it. Conrad. I'm just almost through the comments here. Robert, good night, everybody. $6.96, yeah. No, that's good. I was surprised, actually. Yeah, you too, Sonic. You have a great night. Don't eat stuff from the gardens around your place. Ed M. That's okay. It's still there. We did Invisible Rabbit. We did put another coronavirus show up at my BitChute channel this evening. Shot it last night. It's almost 2 hours. It's part 3. And it's a recap of the first 100 days. So part 3 is now up at my BitChute channel. And you can't put it on YouTube, right? You get a strike right away for having a conversation. We'll remind everybody that we need donations. I'm tortured myself, but hey, I've been here before, and it ain't no fun, trust me, doing what I'm doing. But you got equipment is broken down. Can't keep up with the expenses over the last 4 months or 5 months. I can't catch up is what I should say. And I can't get ahead. And there's 2 links at the bottom of the description that people can donate directly to me. That's the only 2 ways you can donate to me. The link to my site, you'll see a donate button, black donate button. Links below. And that's for credit cards, and the other one's PayPal. It's directly to me. Hopefully the nuclear industry will shoot me, put me out of my misery someday. That's a joke, by the way, nuclear. Just kidding. I really like beating the shit out of nuclear. I live for this every single day, by the way. Okay, frigate, let's call it a night. Just killing you. Just killing you, Dana. Trying to get the video to go like this. Here we go. Have a great night, great day tomorrow. We'll see everybody tomorrow night. Hugs for everybody. We'll see everybody on 24 hours or so. My goodness, there's so much news the weekend. It's just, we got a big show for tomorrow night. As if it ever stops. This is the show that never ends, for sure. Give us a thumbs up if you think about it. And we appreciate your valuable time. Have a great day tomorrow. Hugs for everybody. Take care.